Yo, what's going on? You are in tune with the One More Thing, and I am about to present an amazing interview that tells the tale of one of the most important documentaries that has ever been made about jungle culture. I don't use those words lightly. Hyper, the Stevie Hyper D documentary is absolutely phenomenal and an essential watch for anybody who really cares about the history of this movement, the culture, the inspirations, and the influences who are behind it. Stevie meant everything and represented everything and was taken far too soon. I can't express how important this documentary is. I went to see it when it did its first tour, and it's about to do the rounds again. We've been told that it's not going to be on any streaming services until at least next year. So if you want to see this documentary, you need to find out where it's being played, and they are going around different cinemas and film festivals throughout the year. So please check it out. And now stay tuned for the next 50 minutes or so as I'm joined by the writers and directors and creators of the documentary, which is Jamie Ross Hulme and Daryl Austin, who is Stevie Hyper D's nephew, and plays an integral role in the film, a really vital role. He's the narrator. And I'm also joined by Uncle Doug's and Nicky Blackmarket, and also my colleague and mentorship student, Tom Cousin, as well. This is an immense interview. It's got so much information on the documentary and just about the history in general of jungle culture and UK underground music culture and all of the amazing elements that make it so special. Without further ado, here is the interview. As always, thank you very much for watching, subscribing, supporting, and all that groovy stuff. Now let's enjoy. Firstly, I'm just going to say congratulations, and let's go right the way back to the very, very start, because I was privy to these conversations. I saw this start as a radio concept. Doug, it was the first time I spoke to you. 2013, I want to say, maybe 2014. But yeah, I remember being introduced to you, Daryl, on an email around about this time. I just started on Drum and Bass Arena. It feels like a whole eternity ago. I mean, could you have even possibly imagined that it would have got to this stage and taken this long, and that you would have been able to develop your idea in such a successful way?
That's me, yeah.
Go, Daryl.
You and Jamie, yeah. Go for it, Daryl. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, when I first met Jamie, it was just an idea. Jamie was super enthusiastic and said, yeah, we can get something together. And then, 12 years down the line, it took 12 years to get it done. And with the 12 years, I think me and Jamie grew as filmmakers and writers and directors and producers, and was, able to get the finished product to something that, we didn't imagine at the beginning. We were just going to do a little 20-minute, half-hour YouTube film, Jamie. And then, we had a lot of people supporting us that were giving us ideas and feedback. And the feedback was that, we needed something more kind of related to the history of Steve and the history of jungle. So we went back after maybe 2 years already filming and nearly having what we thought was, our YouTube short, or at least maybe just a small TV show. And now we're in Odeon. So I didn't imagine this. No, I didn't.
Yeah, and it was a unique experience to watch it in the cinema, to be part of that. I watched it in Cardiff. And pretty much any head who has ever been involved in drum and bass or jungle in South Wales was in that room. It was packed. I've got goosebumps thinking about it now, seeing old friends, meeting new friends, new generation artists and stuff. It brought people together. And I know that my mate up in Manchester had the same experience. Talking to Jamie earlier on the phone, he's saying about people up in Liverpool, all around the country. I've been to many documentary screenings as a journalist, as a music fan in all my years. I've never experienced that type of unity, that unity in a cinema really before. And I think like, it's a lot of that is down to how personal this project is, especially for you, Daryl, really. I'm sure most people watching it shed a few tears for you at, key points in the film without kind of ruining the story for too many people who haven't watched it yet. It's an incredibly personal journey that you went on and that you've shared publicly. That must have taken quite a lot, and you must have had to go through quite a lot to put yourself out there so openly, I think.
Yeah.
Can I just say as well, for Daryl, this isn't like a natural, some of us are natural show-offs in life, and we've chose that route. Even though Daryl's uncle is Stevie Hyper D, he never chose that route, and the first ideas and cuts of the film weren't how the public ended up seeing them. Daryl was like a very reluctant movie star.
Yeah.
But where we are now, looking back, there was no other way of it being really shot, and more power to Daryl, because he, like I say, he didn't want to be the guy. That's not who he is in life, and he stepped up for his uncle and for the project, and it's been the making of the film, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Cheers, man.
No, completely, I think, really. And that must have been hard. Were there any kind of points where you almost had to talk to yourself or make that decision of like, right, I'm going to take myself completely out of my comfort zone here? And go through that process. Were there kind of moments where you really had to push yourself or didn't?
Just ask Jamie about Allgate East.
Jamie, tell us about Allgate East.
Which bit are we talking about?
So many of them.
Exactly, so many. Then that 2 weeks of the narration.
Yes, yeah. So basically, like in July 2020, after we'd shown Doug's, Nicky, like our kind of core extended team, the film, including our exec producers, they were like, look, we think, to Daryl's point earlier, we think we can really push it a bit further. We really feel that Daryl should be further in the center of it. I had a sort of a vision of like how he could be in the center of it off the back of a film that I'd seen and I'd studied, called Evelyn, which is about this filmmaker, Orlando von Eitzdale, who's like an Oscar-winning documentary filmmaker. He made a film about his brother that committed suicide. And originally, when we were sort of in the edit of the film, that was kind of always in the back of my mind. When we kind of got further and further into it, that film kind of came further to the forefront, as well as Senna, which is the Asif Kapadia film. And when we were in the narration in Allgate East, which I now remember, we were like redoing, because we basically, a lot of the narration on the original cut of the film was just done on like a little like handy sort of like audio
recorder. Yeah.
Really sort of basic. So then we went back into the sort of edit studio and re-recorded it on a proper mic in a proper booth, basically soundproof booth. And Daryl was like, yeah, I'm not sure about this, man. I was like, no. You got to, like, you're telling the story now. Like, we've agreed that you're telling, I don't know, man. I don't know about that. I don't know about this. But with those kind of films in mind, I was like, okay, right. We've got to bring Daryl forward, not just from a sort of a visual point of view, but from like a writing point of view. And that's kind of where he came like fully sort of like further into the process. But there was some stuff. I mean, what's funny, and I was actually talking to somebody the other day, and I think it was like an off, it was just, and I think like what was kind of remarkable about like what you did was that a lot of the writing was obviously done like entirely off the top of your head, which is like just incredible anyway. But I remember like recording the sequence, the funeral sequence, like right at the end. And I remember both takes you did it. You did the first take. I made you stand up. I remember you stand up in the room. I was like, stand up. He's like, your energy's off. And he was like, oh God, this is not. And I was like, proper like,
real directing.
Well, he weren't bossy, was he, Daryl? He's not like that, is he, Jamie? I've never seen that side to him, to be fair.
and then basically, like, so the first take you did on the audio, the sort of the budget audio recorder we had, you did it one take. I said, just like think about that whole moment, that basically that final funeral sequence. we cut around basically the audio of like Daryl talking. And that was kind of the basis basically of what he ended up doing for the rest of the film. But that sequence, again, using that, I think that was the first one when we went back in and we were redoing the audio. It's like, okay, right, you did that in one take before. Let's redo it again. And like, because you naturally knew it. And I said, just do exactly what I said before. Get your mind into where you were basically at the time. And I remember you closed your eyes and you're like, okay, I'm ready. And then you just did it, and you did it off the top of your head, like straight word for word, pretty much perfect. And I was like, oh my God.
Wow.
Like mental. I don't think we've ever really talked about that too much before. And that is like crazy. You were able to do that. And that was kind of like the sort of the basis for like how we collaborated from that point onwards. It was like, okay, right.
Yeah, but it made it feel a lot like it was more natural.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rather than like I was maybe trying to be an actor.
And it had to be natural, and I think through that we follow your journey, we follow your relationship. We show just complete the documentary brings out empathy for you. Like everybody is following your kind of path, really, as you're following Stevie. So I mean, Nicky, let's bring you into the conversation. What was that like? At what point did you come into this? It must have been quite early on. And what was it like?
When I first seen 3 cuts of this film. I seen a very, very, very early cut. Then I see the screening across the road from my old shop. What cut was that, Jamie?
That was like the sort of near to final cut. We'll call it the festival cut, for want of a better phrase, or screening cut. And that was in like
still not like the very finished bit. So I've seen 3 different films. You could say 3 different films. And when I see the final one, it just blew me away. And just like the whole time, just hairs standing up on, I can't, like you're in the dance. When you're in the film, it's like you're in the dance back in the day. It brought me back to there. And it was, so much emotions were going on, like so many emotions. To really describe. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah.
It's great to see. I feel honoured that to see the 3 different, that I saw 3 completely different versions.
Yeah.
And the final product was just amazing.
Like the evolution of it, really, in that type of way. And what I think another thing.
And the first one is nothing like the very first one. Nothing like the finished product.
It was nothing like the final one.
Nothing like.
I'm glad we did end up doing that, but honestly, it nearly broke me and Daryl physically.
So was that the footage then of the New Year's Eve party, which kind of, I mean, this again brings it together, is Daryl taking the lead and us kind of being led through the film and through Stevie's life by Daryl, but it's that event that you had that footage for. And when I was watching it from the point of view of somebody who has attempted to make a documentary and is involved and watches a lot of documentaries, that's another incredible narrative device that you use so well. It's that you kind of, everything kind of feels, you feel like you're there. And it feels like it could be any New Year's Eve. It doesn't feel like it's in the late 90s. It doesn't feel like it's now either. It's just this kind of moment in time, and it doesn't matter. At this point, when you're inside that documentary and watching it, it doesn't matter whether you're in the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, or now. It is something that everybody can relate to, whether you're a teenager watching it, whether you're in your 50s or 60s watching it, and anything in between. That having that footage that came in quite later, and I'd imagine the 3rd version of the film and the evolution that Nicky talks about, this is the first time that footage is in there, or maybe I'm wrong.
Interestingly, no, actually, we did have that footage in there, but I think like where we advanced, and even with the final version, which is very similar to the sort of the mid version, as it were, where we advanced, to Daryl's point earlier, we advanced in terms of like filmmaking ability, storytelling ability, particularly because we had that footage, but we weren't like capable enough or experienced enough to know how to like anchor it on from a narrative point of view. So the main bits of archive we had were from this guy Tom Cordell, who shot that, you know, the mini doc, the One Nation mini doc, which is on YouTube and was kind of has gone viral multiple different times on various different years. And I got the rushes from him. He was like one of the first bits of archive we got, actually before Gary Clark. And then Gary Clark, who is DJ Dougal's dad, he was the sort of second main archive provider, or actually probably the main archive provider, but the second one to give us the chunk of footage. When I realized that basically he had the same New Year's Eve, but basically from a different rave, which was Dreamscape versus One Nation, I was like, okay, right, we've got like a few hours worth of like, you know, like New Year's Eve 97 footage. And that was kind of like the real, how do you say, the real kind of like light bulb moment. It was like, oh, the main interview is from 97. Like a big chunk of footage we've got is from 97. And actually the story we're sort of telling is centered between 93 and 98. So we kind of hung the main narrative like of the film, we hung that on 97 into 98. And that's why I kind of feel like we were able to sort of pull that through in the same way that, like, I've said this before, but in the same way that in The Last Dance they hang the Chicago Bulls final season 97 to 98 as the sort of central narrative point, basically, like through the film. We use that same technique basically with New Year's Eve 97 because we had that. The bulk of the footage was that was the kind of the main through line of the film.
And we all know that, like, within kind of 7 months of that, you know, he did pass. Like, that's the worst thing about watching something like that, or the most heartbreaking thing about watching it is that you know the ending. You know the ending in that type of way, and you know that that's, you know, he's there talking about all of his plans, and he's got this energy about him. But you know that, you know, so we know what the reality is going to be, and it makes that narrative thread all the more stronger, doesn't it? Really, in that way. And I think the range of spokespeople you had on, something that all other jungle, drum and bass, or any music genre documentaries tend to do is focus on people from within that scene. But you had such a range of people from so many different, like, kind of, you know, from so many other creative movements and so many other aspects of Stevie's life. You know, Stevie's mum is an absolute legend, and his friend, and I'm gutted that I can't remember his name, and if I was more prepared, but who works really high up in, you know, his friend from school who also works in the music industry. Yeah, I mean, Darkus, that's right. I mean, what an impressive, you know, kind of spokesperson and commentator who was there all the way through, knew Stevie before, and was trying to get him to that space where he needed to be. And I think it's having voices as authoritative as that, which really kind of galvanized just how much you're being told in the documentary, I think. Like, and I'm sure that must have taken a long time to curate such a great range of people contributing towards it.
Yeah, that was part of the reason why it took so long. And I said to Daryl, like from the very, very beginning, like before we'd even started shooting, and we were sort of developing the idea, like for like 4.5 years, we were developing the idea before we even started shooting. I said the first people we need in the film, well, two of them are actually on screen. Oh, actually three, because including Daryl. Was obviously Daryl, yourself, Nicky, Doug's, and also as well Darkus, because Darkus was sort of like integral to the story, but also as well he holds authority, as you said, Dave, and he also went on to become, and actually when we interviewed, he was like the height of his he just the height of his how do you say, sort of success, I suppose. He was the president of Ireland in the UK. Had just released Dizzy's album, which he'd signed, had was his first, no, it was his second Ireland album, and Florence and the Machine, I think, were the height of her popularity. And yeah, we were managed to interview him in the Kensington office of Ireland Universal in, it was August 2017. And
Right.
that was like the sort of beginning. That was like the real beginning of the process for us. But we knew we had a story once we shot Darkus and Nicky, basically.
Can I just say, going back to what you said, Dave, about the across the board people, you know, from So Solid to Heartless to Andy C to this one to that one. I think the right thing to say is that the working title, the original working title, was The Hidden Influence of the film,
Yeah.
because, like, you know, you can go back to the very start, and Steve influenced pretty much everyone along the way, which then goes out to, you know, like a ripple effect, isn't it? You know, you influence Skibbity, who influences Mega Man, who influences this one, and before you know it, the drill kids of today, or whatever's current. Obviously, you can tell I'm old. 'Cause drill probably don't even exist anymore. But my point is, kids that don't even know they're influenced by Stevie because they're influenced by someone by Stevie. In amongst them genetics, they're influenced by Stevie. So he is a hidden influence. Obviously, the title ended up being Hyper, but what you're saying there is true. He influenced that whole cast of people and 10 million other kids along the way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it joins those dots and zooms out to show a much wider kind of picture. And also, you know, it kind of captures a lot of his personality that people wouldn't have known, even if they'd have followed him, even if they were around at the time or not, but knew his lyrics and stuff. I related to him in that just inability to stop, just that constant momentum. Also, as a child, being incredibly accident prone, and the tumbling thing really stuck with me. I've got scars on my face to prove that. Like that, just kind of long before the term neurodiverse was ever come about, he was neurodiverse, wasn't he? He was a gifted youth long before he picked up the mic, Daryl, wasn't he?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think, you know, the era that he was born in was I suppose a very explosive music musical era. So, you know, you had the soul, you know, disco, and then the reggae, you know, into hip hop. So like I always say, I'm very fortunate in the generation I was born, because I've been able to experience so many different genres of music. Steve was like at the beginning of that, so it was almost like he didn't know it himself, but his musical, because Steve used to DJ used to do like family tapes for the family. You know, we always had his little turntable and made little mixtapes for us. And the music was always, it was never, you know, we should do a reggae tape 1 month and then a soul tape there. You know, Steve's what he listened to was, you know, like I was so younger than him. I was just like, it was hip hop up until, you know, jungle came along, basically. And then I went into jungle and then left jungle, went back into hip hop. So I kind of pigeonholed myself, because when the garage scene and all that happened, I was like, it's all rubbish. Like, and I suppose at the same time as well, I was a bit bitter, maybe, I think is a better term, that you know, you had this success, all these guys were having success, and not that people weren't talking about Steve, but people just didn't, to me, didn't feel like they were giving him the recognition
Yeah.
that he should have got. And you know, that was for me, you know, the main drive. And you know, to your fact, when I first met Jamie, I said, you know, for this to work, we've got to have everybody from across the scene. So you know, from the jungle to the garage, you know, British MC culture has grown so much in the last 20 years that, you know, when people were out, you know, you take someone like Silver Bullet, you know, when Silver Bullet come out with, you know, his track all those years ago, you know, he was, not people rated him, people that rated rap rated him, but, you know, the Americans, hell no, never rated him. But then, you know, 25 years, 30 years down the line, you know, we've got people like Skepto doing collabs with American artists. You know, us as a MC culture over here could never imagine that 25 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, to be where we are now, and to know like Steve was at the precipice of that, you know, and like James said, and Doug's, you know, that he, so, you know, someone that's a fan of, you know, Stormzy, you know, would be a fan of Stormzy. And then, you know, someone that's a fan of whoever influenced Stormzy. So, you know, and that's what hip hop is. You know, you go to America and you talk about rap or hip hop out there, they know their shit, man. You know, and everybody that, you know, no one talks about hip hop without referring to Kool Herc or African Bambaataa, or, you know, all these various people that help lay that foundation. And unfortunately, we've been quite bad at that in the UK, and maybe it's because dance music is still.
They know their history. They know their history with their music. They know completely all the history.
And they celebrate it, it's very rarely that you'll go to an event and it's just a hip hop event or it's just an R&B event. They always seem to, because they know the lineage is there. Stevie Wonder, Stevie Wonder's getting an award. It might be a hip hop award because he influenced hip hop. So it's like how they celebrate that. That was kind of my main goal in the film, was just documenting our history. And having Steve around that.
Yeah.
I think to both Doug's point about the original title of the film, we talked about this off camera as well, Dave as well, and also Daryl's point about celebrating culture and stuff as well. It's like Daryl and myself are both like big hip hop heads, and like particularly New York hip hop. And I think to the point of like, them founding fathers are always like sort of champions. Like they may not be champion financially, but certainly from a cultural point of view, they're champions. And I think like our goal with the original title of the film, which sort of became the mission statement for the film, was to just sort of solidify his legacy and just show how influential he was. Obviously, the film grew into something much more, which is like what got us into Odeon, which is a proper feature film, which entered kind of biopic territory and did all these amazing things from a filmmaking point of view. But, one of the things alongside that, which is what I'm most proud of, is that we really have made like a cultural, like a cultural film that can be part of history, and forever. We're all gone. That this film will have all of our names attached to it, which is incredible. It's really
and kind of consolidate kind of jungle culture, UK underground culture, also like black music, sound system music, kind of the influence of that on a much kind of wider cultural picture in that type of way. And I think it's really cool. And Nicky, you're part of this. There's those iconic scenes from Toronto, I believe it is, isn't it? Where, you're kind of seeing like Toronto was a real kind of one of the earliest kind of spots to really embrace the UK culture and the UK sound. And now, you've managed to capture that there. That was the start of North America as a territory beginning to understand how UK artists and how, what we were bringing to rap culture really in that type of way, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. And with Canada at that time, we didn't really, unless you went out there or someone had come over from there, you'd never know, you wouldn't know how big it is out there. Like their jungle scene was massive in the night, massive. It blew up just like what it did here. But we wouldn't know that because there was no internet, so we didn't know that unless, like I say, people would come over here, get tapes, they boot them over there, and sell them and boot them and sell them, and people become big over there. But
what was it like? What was your first? Was Stevie with you the first time you went over there? Because obviously, having written books with Fantasy and Ray Keefe, they've both told me about Toronto and Canada and their early experiences and some really funny stories.
He went over there. I think he come over there the second time I went over there.
So you didn't share that first time, like, fucking hell, it's massive over here, 6,000 miles away. So he kind of warned you a little bit.
I think that was Steve's second time as well.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. And it was just a different, it's a different climate, different era, completely different, a different time. And I remember we went on their version of like Top of the Pops, which is called Electric Circus, and it was on a channel called Much Music. I think it was called Much Music, and it was called Electric Circus. I think the program was, and we went on with Devious as well, and just to think how long ago that was, it's crazy. But it was just mind blowing. The events. I mean, the last event one of the last events that I did out there with Stevie, the last event we did together was Liquid Adrenaline for a house guy called Hetiras.
Oh
Big house, big
yeah.
house guy out
He did the
Hetiras.
track Space Invaders, I think, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
J
Him
Magic
and his,
remixed.
him and his brothers used to do a thing called Liquid Adrenaline, and massive warehouse, absolutely massive warehouse. And yeah, me and Steve went out there. And this is about a week before Steve passed away.
Wow.
And he said, and I'll never forget, he said, he said, this is my time now, because his album was coming out with Ireland, and it just, all things are going on, and it was, it it was crazy. But that gig there was just, and it's going around on the net now. It's going around. It's still going around on the net, but that had explosive energy. That set there, and we were just absolutely pouring with sweat in there. It was, there weren't no aircon in there, but it was, it was, yeah.
Go on.
Something lodged in the brain there forever.
Yeah. You're never going to forget that. That's proper core memory business. Oh, no. I want to bring Tom into the conversation here because he's literally just finished watching the documentary. Tom's my colleague. He's 20 years younger than me. So kind of, maybe, a few years younger than yourself as well, Nicky. So he's from another generation, but it'd be great to get Tom. What was your kind of impression having just watched it like moments ago, really?
I feel like a lot of the scene to me probably lost a lot of its magic. Even when it comes to just like documenting it and reporting on it, you'd see like the videos that show you like the whole crowd. You had people going around interviewing DJs backstage or like the ravers at the front. But the thing that stood out to me that I would like to live myself was going to like the record stores and just meeting producers or just being within that sort of scene. Yeah, there was a lot of goosebumps kind of moments in the film.
Yeah, go on. I mean, the record stores that's where you made friends. That's where you got gigs. That's where you found out about dub plates coming out. That's where you found out about the next raves. And yeah,
it was the meeting point. It was basically the meeting point and old school internet.
Right. From the other side of the counter, obviously Nicky's always been our hero because he's the guy, isn't he? But as a punter, as a kid, especially when you weren't getting nowhere, that was your one place. Because like not everyone could go dub cutting, not everyone had the links to get dats and whatnot. So your average Joe, like me from Dagenham, who knew nobody, I could go to my record shop and I could stand there and talk to, it could be Winston or Ash or Reverend Boogie Times, and someone like Hype might walk in. Anyone could walk in, and you could, if you had the confidence, you could strike up a conversation with them, and it was like them things inspired you. It wasn't just about buying records or picking up a flyer. It was little moments that kept you being like, I want to be like them. I want to be in that thing. You felt like
a
if you was
community.
into rock and roll music, you're not going to bump into Mick Jagger, you know what I mean? But in our world, you could bump into like anyone on any given day at any record shop, and that was a thing that kind of really meant the world to me. It kept me engaged with like I felt like it was possible. Do you know what I mean? So record shops really, apart from at the top level where Nicky would interact with Ray, who would interact with Brian G, who would interact with Frost and Groove and all, like when we witnessed them things as punters, they gave us like the vibe. So what you're saying, Tom, it's a shame because the internet is great and we can all do these kind of things, but there was nothing like driving to somewhere and standing there for 8 to 10 hours. It's like going fishing. Sometimes you wouldn't even catch a fish, but you're still happy with the day because it's been a beautiful day. Sometimes you might not buy a record, but you stand in a record shop for 8 hours and come home full.
Yeah, that's a perfect description, and that was happening all around the country as well. I mean, obviously in London there was you were likely to see the pioneers walking in.
Nicky was
But
the king, bro.
yeah, but we had the similar. So I had a comparable experience in Catapult in Cardiff, and I know people all over. Well, what was it in? I'm trying to think the one in Manchester now that Mark XDC was running. Eastern Bloc, and all of these. Every city would have its hub, and it was like you said, you might just go there. You might not come out with a record. You might not even be able to afford a record that week. You'd still go down, hang out, catch friends, catch a vibe, try and chase a gig, anything really. And that was that is something that we can't get back. But it's really interesting to hear your take, Tom, because for me it wasn't nostalgic, but that's because I did live through quite a great deal of the 90s and was raving from 95 onwards. So maybe it's not nostalgic for me because I do have those reference points, and I think that's a really important point to make, that there are certain aspects of Stevie's journey which didn't involve, it's like, what do you think Stevie's take would have been on modern technology? How do you think he would have embraced things like the internet, social media and stuff like that? I mean, it's a hard question to answer maybe, but what do you think he would have made of it, Daryl?
If Steve's anything like me, and I'm a lot like Steve, he bloody would have struggled. I still struggle up to today with me. So I can get myself around on a computer, but the whole present stuff of the social media and like how you see people operate, I find it very hard. And me,
do you know what? With what I've learned along the way,
I think
he would have embraced the sound, maybe not so much the technology. Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. I was going to say. I think he would adapt to the sounds, and he'd be collabing with whoever. He'd be collabing with Snoop Dogg or with Kylie Minogue, or I'm sure he would be everybody.
I think that's how Dark
with everybody.
Yeah, I think that's how Dark has envisioned him. That once he would have had the first album out, the second, I remember going through the contract, the second album was basically an open, he could work with what producer he wanted, what artist he wanted, and so I think Dark has kind of helped shape him into the artist for that first Island album, but then would have given Steve the space and growth and then met enough people in the industry to say. So I think Steve would have definitely done a second album and it would have been everything. So it would have been like, he would have started like how we've done the film. It would have been reggae based, it would have been hip hop based, and then what he would have done is taken all of that and then thrown it into his jungle culture.
Yeah,
I think that was how Steve envisioned himself. So he would have had a track with Redman on a hip hop flex, but then had that going to go and give it to Ray Keith and said, now put that in a D&B jungle flex. So I believe that's where Steve direction would have gone. And I always say that I think Steve would have been the first Dizzy.
Yeah, wow.
Even though a lot of people will say, "Oh, this one had more success," but Dizzy was the first one to get signed by a label. His own sounds, with me, not much marketing. That kind of real roots level hip hop vibe, should I say? I think, that's it, and that's what Steve was trying. That's what Steve was trying to do. He wanted to kind of, bring drum and bass out of the clubs, and into people's living rooms. He wanted to celebrate the culture, and unfortunately, what Island had produced, Steve was happy with that because he always knew he had, the whole artillery of every jungle drum and bass producer that we had, grown up with in the scene. So, I think he was confident that, whether the album was, where people listened to it said, oh, this ain't jungle, this ain't drum and bass. Steve was confident he could still flip it and, do something, and, do something else with it.
Yeah. Or bring drum and bass to it really in that type of way and put his stamp on it completely. Yeah. So I know, like Jamie, you've got to go for another course. We will finish this at in about kind of 5 minutes or so. And I want to get your last thoughts really. Was there anything that you couldn't include in the documentary because you just didn't have enough time or there wasn't quite the right footage to bring in there? But were there any kind of things that you had to put aside in order to keep the story so tight and so succinct in the way that you have? It must have been, from an editing point of view, there must have been a lot of difficult decisions to make, because as a storyteller, you just want to tell everything. You've got all this information. You just want to, certainly from my point of view, you just want to go, "Blah," but you can't. You need to guide people through, and you have done in such an amazing way. Were there tricky decisions to make during that time?
In answer to your question, we did have a version of the film which was about 2 hours long, and we had everything we wanted in it. And it was like, it was shocking. It was actually the worst version of the film that we had.
Aye.
Doug and Nicky never saw that version.
Yeah, I never saw that version. Jamie just said, don't watch it."
So yes, so one so there was, sorry, somebody just messaged me just a second ago. Just bear with me. Bear with me 1 second.
That's no problem at all. And I mean, I think, you know, I as you're doing that, I'll just kind of cover this. Like, this is the thing about telling a story. And sometimes you've got all of this thing. This is the responsibility of an editor, is that you can get all of this research, you can get all of this content, all of these facts and stuff. But sometimes when you're telling a story and you're celebrating the life and the influence of somebody, you have to be pretty ruthless with certain aspects of things.
So the version that we had had a whole sequence basically at the end of it, which was kind of like the sort of mission statement for the film, which is all about his influence. We cut that out completely. It's about 5 minutes long, and that was that sort of a very, very different feeling of an ending. It kind of was much more about what went on to happen after with Garage and Grime and blah blah blah. We lost that completely, and then there was a lot more to do with like sort of the complicated kind of dynamics in the sort of the relationship, I guess, between Daryl, between Stevie, between what happened in the argument and various other things. And it was just a mess. It just wasn't working. And then we just at that point we were like, there's something really sort of aesthetically nice in here. We just need to just hack away at it. And we largely had the structure basically in place at that time. And then we just hacked away, and then brought on a story consultant who helped us really like focus in on what the story was we were telling. And then we ended up with what we ended up with, which was half an hour shorter, which was the original version with everything that we wanted in there was like 2 hours long. And then we cut that.
Wow. And the ending that you do have, I mean, I was trying not to kind of spoil anything for people who haven't watched it, but the ending had me in tears because it had his thoughts from his daughter who never got to meet him or anything like that. And from the point of view of a dad, like, I can find myself welling up now, like that, just the beauty of that, her clarity as well on, you know, her thoughts on who he must have been, and just walking an inch in her shoes for a second and imagining what it must have been like to grow up with a famous father who you've never met, and as you know, you weren't able to meet. You know, I send maximum love out to his daughter for being able to articulate that way. What a powerful ending. Like, sorry to anybody who hasn't watched this yet. It is so moving and amazing. And that, did you reach out to her? How did that all come about? Was that as a result of talking to the story consultant?
So Tiana's kind of always, since Steve's passing, we always kept in contact. And as she got older, she just kind of gravitated more and more to us. So she's very close with my younger sister and my mum. She's just had a second child, a little girl.
Wow.
So it's like, you know, that when that happened, when it came up to changing the way we had done the film, we had to have that conversation with her. It was like, you know, we really like you in there. And at first, I think she was slightly reluctant because, like she said, she didn't have any stories about her dad. But Jamie's a really good director, and you know, he has a way of asking certain questions and, you know, getting the answer that he thinks he should have, or the way it's delivered. He's not like he doesn't put words in your mouth. He just asks the question, and then if you don't answer it, he'll just ask the question again.
Yeah, I mean, that's the art of interviewing, as quite a few of us in this call knows. Doug's knows that, and Doug's interviewed me. I've interviewed Doug's many times and stuff like that. And it's the art of interviewing. I want to wrap up now and wish you the best of luck. What are the next stages? So by the time this comes out, I think we might have just missed the Hackney one, but there's a Brighton Film Festival. Maybe it's the other way around. But you've got a couple of more kind of film festivals, haven't you? And then how else does this roll out? And will we eventually be able to see it on Netflix? Can the world see this, really? Because they need to.
So basically, the next screening we've got is tomorrow's in Stroud Film Festival, which is the 13th of March. Then next week in Hackney, we're doing a Q&A with Sting from Telepathy. They've got a book which is out at the moment called Step in Time, which is about Sting's journey through music with Telepathy and Deja Vu. So Sting will be joining us there. And then the 27th is at Comedia, which is the Picture House in Brighton. And then we're taking it around the world. Basically, that's like the next step. So we're going to be doing event screenings around the world in various countries like the US, Canada, Germany, Switzerland, Thailand, hopefully Australia, New Zealand.
Japan.
Amazing.
And then the goal, we're not, and this one I want to be like really clear with people, not because we're being difficult, but because we've got licensing things we need to get by, is when it's not going on streaming until the end of the year, basically.
Wow. So there we go. Everybody who's watched this and anybody who's keen who hasn't watched it yet, you're going to have to wait until at least the end of the year to watch it on your telly at home. So get your asses off your chairs and get to any cinemas if you can, if there is any opportunities. And it's going global. This isn't a hidden influence anymore. This is a proper international influence. And we really,
I'll tell you before we go and forget as well, there's new music coming. I'll go back to Jamie again, but just to remind you.
New music. Wow. So in all of this, you've uncovered kind of DATs and recordings and things like that then, or what can you shed, or are you going to leave us on that cliffhanger? You are as well, aren't you? Oh, man. There we go. That's a perfect cliffhanger.
This is the perfect time to play the EastEnders drums, mate, and
boom,
we're
boom,
out of
boom,
it.
boom. Amazing. Stevie Hyper D, rest in peace. Thank you all so much for your time. I wish you all the best of luck. Oh, and he's got a lighter as well. I've given up smoke. Oh, I have got a lighter. There we go.
There you go, man.
Go on. Amazing. Thank you so much. And yeah, thank you to everybody who's watched. And I wish you all the best of luck. Thank you, guys.
Big up.